Ja, hallo und willkommen zu einer neuen Folge des Tech und Community Podcasts. In der heutigen Folge ist Paul Robichaux zu Gast. Paul ist MVP für Microsoft 365 Apps und Services und er war Trainer für Microsoft Certified Exchange Master mit dem Schwerpunkt Unified Messaging. Heute ist Paul zu Gast in seiner Rolle als Senior Director of Product Management bei KeepIt. Viel Spaß! Okay. Hello, Paul. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure, Thomas. My name is Paul Robichaux, and I am a Microsoft 365 Apps and Services MVP. I think that's what we're calling it this week.
Yes.
But I'm also the senior director for product management at KeepIt, which makes cloud backup software for 365 and for a number of other systems. And although you can't see it if you can't see the video, there's a cat on my lap, and you may hear him at some point during the presentation. I just want to make sure everybody's forewarned.
Awesome. So we know each other for more than 10 years now, as we met
Yes.
at the Exchange 2010 Masters Training back then in Redmond. So does Exchange Server still play an important part or important role in your daily work?
I don't do a lot with Exchange directly anymore.
Oh,
I think Microsoft has really, they really have been a victim of their own success. So at first, around Exchange 2010 time, when they first started talking about how they were going to deliver large, low-cost mailboxes, you probably remember that specific phrase, because they said it all the time. It's like all of the Microsoft employees got up in the morning and they practiced saying it 10 times in the mirror before they left the house. They did it. They gave us large, low-cost mailboxes in the cloud and reliably at large scale. And so because of that, there's very little reason to run an on-prem Exchange server anymore for the vast majority of customers. The cloud offering is too good. It's less expensive. It's more secure. It's easier to administer. There's no arguing any of those things, I don't think.
I definitely agree with that. So as we gathered today for talking about cloud backup solution, and you're now working for a company called KeepIt, I think so. I'm personally interested in how did you get involved with KeepIt as a company?
So that's a really good question. As you probably know, I was working for Quadratech, running their product management organization, and then we were purchased by Quest Software. Quest is a really interesting company because they have such a broad product line. They make products for on-prem, they make products for the cloud, they make security products, they make data protection products, they make device management products. Pretty much anything that you can do with a Microsoft operating system or cloud offering, they have some kind of product that plugs into it. But I really wanted to get back to a smaller company environment where I could be more directly involved in you hear people talk about farm to table at restaurants where you sort of can go visit the cows and the chicken, and you can then see every step of the path from the cow grazing in the field to the steak that's on your plate. And I wanted to get closer to that in product development. So I decided to come join KeepIt to help them do that with their cloud backup products.
Awesome. So cloud backup is still a interesting topic. So why would someone need a cloud backup solution? Because isn't the cloud a secure place to store data?
That is a very, very good question. And my thinking on it has evolved quite a bit over the last 10 years or so. I think at the beginning of let's call it the Microsoft 365 era, right? It really starts with hosted Exchange and then moves on through BPOS and then Exchange Online and then into Office 365, now Microsoft 365. Microsoft all along has said the same thing from beginning to end. We will protect your data better than you can. We'll have 4 copies of your mailbox. We will have gates and guards and guns protecting the data center. We'll have redundant power. We'll have all these things that you probably don't have yourself. So you don't have to worry about us losing your data. They said that back in the early days. They still say it now. and it's true. But what Microsoft is promising is that they will not lose all of your data all at the same time. They're not promising that they'll never lose any of your data. And more importantly, they're not promising that they can get your data back if you lose it. The proof of that, and the reason, or the thing that I point to when people push back and want to debate, is the existence of what Microsoft calls the shared responsibility model.
Yeah.
So if you go to Google, I was going to say if you Bing it, but if you Bing it, you're probably going to end up talking to the chat engine, and maybe you don't want that. If you go search on the internet for Microsoft shared responsibility model, you'll find a document that they've got that has a nice little table. And in that table, it shows the things that Microsoft says they are purely responsible for, the things that you, as the data owner, are 100% responsible for, and then some things where responsibility is shared between the two of you. And at the end of the day, it's really interesting, right? The more Microsoft reminds people that it's your data, we're holding it in the cloud for you, and we're building services to do things with the data, but at the end of the day, the data belongs to you. Well, guess what? If the data belongs to you, then you are ultimately responsible for protecting it, no matter what Microsoft does or doesn't do. In the data center, in the security world, at the end of the day, if you can't get that data to the people who need it when they need it, you're going to be the one who suffers, not Microsoft.
Yeah, so that's perfectly right. I think that the shared responsibility model is something that people tend to forget about, that Microsoft publishes, and they talked about that in the past more on a pretty regular basis. But
right. I mean, it's seductive. We all love the idea of the cloud being this place where you don't have to worry about anything, right? You don't have to worry about scale. If you need more resources, you just spin up some more elastic computing. If you need more storage, you just push a button. You don't have to order things. You don't have to wait for the UPS truck to bring you a box of servers. It's just magic. And so that's the good part of the cloud is, it can do all those things. The bad part of the cloud is that the responsibility for being able to protect your enterprise data, and more importantly, one of the things I have thought about a lot and have started talking about more is the difference between restoration and recovery, right? And this is a subtle difference in a lot of ways, but Microsoft has a lot of capability to restore your data or to put the data back where it was before something bad happened to it. That's not the same as being able to recover your business operations and go back to work, right? So if you think about what happens when you delete a data item, and by the way, I want to be really clear. I'm not picking on Microsoft because everything that I say here, you could scratch out where it says Microsoft and you could write down SalesForce, or you could write down Google, or you could write down Spotify. Anybody who has your important data in the cloud, all these things that I'm saying are true, and I don't mean it to sound like I'm unfairly criticizing Microsoft. But just because your cloud provider can put your original data back doesn't mean that it's in a form where you can use it or do something with it.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Right. You have to be able to make use of it in a meaningful way. And one good example of that, if you imagine that I have a SharePoint site and the SharePoint site, something bad happens to it. It's compromised by ransomware. It gets deleted. It ends up, the version store has a problem. The underlying problem isn't really what's interesting. But you go to Microsoft support and you say, can you guys can you roll my site collection back to the way it was on Friday? Because I knew it was good then. Microsoft support is able to do that. They can do a site level or site collection level restore. So they put your data back. Well, now you have your data back, but you don't have any of the incremental changes that happened to it since that point in time restore. So your data has been restored, but your operations are not recovered. somebody still has to go in and update all of the things that got updated in that time frame. And if you can't do that, then you've essentially lost some data, you've lost some work. So just protecting the data against getting lost in the first place, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient all by itself.
Yeah, so this is more or less similar to the situation that you would have on premises by restoring the from a backup tape for that Friday in specific, and you do not have any proper, let's say, incremental backup for each of the weekdays until the disaster.
That's a really good way to look at it. Because if you think about your on-prem example, if I had, and this is going to sound really ancient to people who have not been working with Exchange for a long time, but one of the things that Microsoft did in Exchange that was revolutionary at the time was they introduced this thing called a recovery storage group. And the idea was, because it could take a very long time to restore a full server with a bunch of large databases from tape, what you could do is you could do the restore to essentially a scratch pad. So I could give Thomas a brand new empty mailbox, and you could log into it and you could do stuff with it while I was restoring your real mailbox. And then at some point when the restore finished, I would merge those two. So you would have all the new mail you had sent from the empty mailbox plus all your old mail. That's a great example. I could recover business operations. In other words, you had the ability to email your customers starting today. Say, hey, we had a little problem with our mailbox, but I just want to let you know I'm going to send your invoice later, or your order is in process, or whatever. You could continue to carry on business. So you restored the operations even though the data hadn't been restored yet. That's it's an old example, but it's a good example of the difference between putting the data back where it's supposed to be and giving people the ability to do whatever their job is.
It's an old example, but still valid. So I think, because you mentioned other cloud providers that where I'm interested in, does KeepIt provide backup capabilities for Microsoft 365 only, or for other cloud providers as well?
So we have tried to take a little bit different approach. Without turning this into a KeepIt commercial, one of the there are really three things that I think separate us from our competitors, or four things, if I'm being complete. One is that we have zero dependencies on public clouds. So we host our own backup services in Equinix data centers. So we have no dependencies on AWS or on Azure or on Google Cloud. We don't host anything there. The entire Microsoft cloud environment could be burning to the ground, and you would still be able to log in to KeepIt and download your backups and restore them to local machines and see your files and see your email. The second is that because we control our entire tech stack all the way down to the hardware, we buy hardware from Dell, but beyond that, we have a custom Linux distribution that we've customized for our own needs. We have our own object store, our own indexer, our own front end built on React. So because of that, two things. One is that we're very tailored to what it is we do, right? We have a purpose-built platform. But the other is that our file system is only immutable. In other words, what we see with some backup providers is they say, well, yeah, we support immutability at the storage level. If you go into Azure and you click the button on your Azure Blob storage that says make this immutable, we only have immutable storage, right? And that was an explicit design decision. The third thing, though, that I want to talk about actually answers your question. We think that Microsoft is if I say center of the universe, that sounds bad. But in reality, that's the workload that people are most worried about backup and recovery for. But it's not the only one. And so we decided that our competitive strategy was going to be to have the best Microsoft offering complemented with the right side dishes. So we support Google Workspace. We have a good Google Workspace product. I'll be very honest and say we don't sell a lot of that because Google doesn't sell a lot of Workspace, right? Probably our most significant product in market right now is our support for SalesForce. Because one thing, and I'm not going to make a lot of friends in Redmond by saying this, But one thing I think that most people would agree is true is that Microsoft wants people to use Dynamics, but people want to use Salesforce.
I'm familiar with both platforms, and I don't really like both of them. So both of them are not
Agreed.
purely intuitive.
Agreed. We find at a lot of our biggest, best large enterprise Microsoft customers that they have chosen to go with Salesforce as their CRM system. For good or bad, that is what it is. But we wanted to try to support people across the entire breadth of all their major cloud systems. So we support Dynamics, we support Salesforce, we support 365, we support Zendesk. We're just about to formally release support for Azure DevOps, which that sounds weird, right? Because people don't think of a DevOps workload as being something you need to protect. But as infrastructure as code becomes much more common, there's a lot of customer demand for being able to protect that part of their infrastructure too.
That's pretty interesting because now you just mentioned larger enterprises, quote unquote. This brings me to my next question regarding KeepIt, because is a cloud backup solution only interesting or needed by larger enterprises, or is this something that would suit smaller, medium-sized businesses as well?
So it actually supports both, but in slightly different ways. So the thing that people usually think about and ask about for backup and recovery is the sort of apocalyptic, I got ransomware or something really bad happened to all of my data at the same time, right? Because for those of us who have roots in the on-prem world, that was always what we worried about, right? Is my building caught on fire, or I tripped and I spilled a Diet Coke into my sand enclosure, right? Those large-scale world-ending problems were always what we worried about. But for smaller businesses, the bigger risk is what I call the oh shit moment, right? Where I accidentally do something, or I do something on purpose that has consequences that I didn't understand or appreciate. I throw away something that turns out to be my winning lottery ticket. And I need to be able to get it back later. And Microsoft understands that is a key use case both for small and large companies. That's why they've got some level of protection for some objects. So there are some, for example, SharePoint, OneDrive have got a recycle bin. If you delete something and you realize 2 days later, oops, I need that again, you can usually go get it back. Where we excel, the value that we bring in is, you remember a minute ago I mentioned that we have our own vertically integrated stack where we control all the technology. What that lets us do is that lets us keep our cost of goods sold very low. And what that lets us do is that we don't have consumption-based pricing. So you don't pay extra to store more data. We don't care if you have a 1 terabyte OneDrive library or a 20 terabyte OneDrive library. We charge per user. And so what that means is what our customers are able to do is keep their data as long as they want to.
Wow.
Meaning, in the very common case where, because this happens to me all the time, right? I throw something away and then 6 months later, I'm like, damn, I need a presentation that talks about this thing. And I already have one. Where did I put it? Everybody's been there, right? The two great problems are, I threw away something that I wish I had, or I know I have this, but I can't find it.
Yeah, absolutely right.
We can't do much to help with that, but we do make it possible for you to be able to go back to any point in time and go, okay, man, I know I had a presentation that talked about how we're going to protect our corporate Spotify data. Let me go see if I can find that. Okay, I found it. Oh, you know what? I don't have it anymore. Let me go get it from my backup. Right? We make that possible and make it easy enough so that you can delegate that to anybody in the organization. It doesn't have to be your expensive M365 global admins. It can be the help desk. You can even delegate that to let users recover their own things from long-term storage if you want.
That's interesting. But now, before I come to a question regarding managed service provider capabilities, I do want to throw out a topic which is more or less the question when we talk about clients in Europe. It's something called GDPR.
Oh boy.
Hey, most of our listeners are located in Europe, so GDPR is the thing for IT on a daily basis. You know this.
I do. And one of the things that is super interesting to me, as your listeners can probably tell, I am just about as American as you can possibly be. But I was actually working for a European company when GDPR came into effect, and have been, adjacent to that space this whole time. KeepIt is headquartered in Copenhagen. So our operations are, we are a European company. We get GDPR. Part of the reason we built our own file system and our own object store was so that from day one, we would be able to guarantee GDPR compliance. But it goes beyond the technology. And what I mean by that, as one example, we have no sub-processors under GDPR. We have there are no third parties that have access to any of your data at any point. And that, on the one hand, means that we've had to build a lot of stuff ourselves, and that's kind of a pain in the ass.
I bet.
But on the other hand, there is nothing like being able to go to a customer, especially in the DACH region, and look them in the eye and say, we don't have any sub-processors.
Yeah.
I might as well be saying, here, I brought you a free beer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, customers love hearing that. It's interesting because when we take that message, you probably remember that BMW had a very successful advertising campaign where they advertised themselves as the ultimate driving machine.
I do remember that one, yeah.
But they had a specific campaign in the United States where they advertised themselves as the European driving machine. And what was interesting about that is they were able to position themselves as sort of having this halo of all of the positive things that people think about when they think about European driving. The quality of engineering and the fit and finish and the driving experience and unlimited speeds on the Autobahn, that campaign, made people think about all those things. So when I tell a customer who's not in the European Union that yes, we were born under GDPR, we're completely GDPR compliant, we can give you the European data protection quality, even though you're not European.
Yeah, awesome.
Americans like hearing that, right? That's become increasingly important.
Interesting.
It doesn't go the other way.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm an American company, I go to Europe and say, yeah, we're going to give you some good old fashioned American privacy. Nobody likes that.
Right? Absolutely right. Yeah. So I mentioned the managed service provider thingy. So does KeepIt support some kind of a multi-tenancy model for managed service providers so that they can manage cloud backups for their customers in a single portal?
We do. In fact, this actually is an area where we have invested a lot in the years since I've been at KeepIt. We brought on a gentleman, my counterpart named Mark Graves, just to run our MSP platform business, because we recognize that MSPs are not, how do I want to put this? An MSP is not just like a collection of small enterprises or big enterprises, right? It's a unique section of the business. So the short answer is we want to enable our MSP partners to do everything that a customer can do for the customer, but also give the MSPs what they need to run their business. So onboarding, reporting, delegation where they want. For example, we have a large number of MSP seats through a couple of our partners where the customer doesn't see the word KeepIt anywhere. They're buying a backup service managed by their partner. It's white labeled for the partner.
Awesome. So you can have custom branding.
The customer, correct. The customer, our customer is the MSP, and our MSP customer does not want their customer to know that KeepIt is in the game. So we support that. We support reseller MSPs because we have some customers where what they want is, or some MSP customers, I should say, where what they want is they want to be able to offer an upsell. So, okay, if you pay us, €10 per user per month, you get Microsoft 365. If you pay us €11, you get Microsoft 365 and we back your data up, for example. That's an important differentiator because if you're only reselling Microsoft licenses, then it very quickly turns into a price battle.
Yes, it does.
Right. So we want to help our partners make more money by giving them something that that the guy, the MSP down the street who's just a licensed reseller can't offer or doesn't offer.
Perfect. So I do have still two personal questions for you. So how did you start your profession in the IT industry?
Oh, that would be a great conversation to have over a large beer.
A large one.
I'll try to give you the short version. And keep in mind, listeners, I'm old, right? I'm 54 this year, so I've been around this career for a while. My first actual job in the IT world came when I was 10 years old. I had an old TRS-80 Model 1 that I had taught myself to program. And I used to hang out around Radio Shack a lot. So this is going to give you a picture of how sad my teenage life was. But I bumped into a guy who had bought a TRS-80 to use it to run his business, and he wanted some changes made to his accounting software. And of course, at that time, all that software was written in BASIC.
Back then.
And so I was able to figure out how to make the changes he wanted, and I actually got paid. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool. You mean I can get paid to fool around with computers? So eventually I went to college. I got my degree in computer science, and I worked as a developer for a number of years. But then I was working on an email encryption product that we wanted to test against Exchange.
Oh, interesting.
And at this time, this was in the time frame of Exchange 5.0, which nobody remembers. Everybody remembers 5.5, but nobody remembers 5.0. So I built a 5.0 server and started, testing how our product worked. And then purely because of an accident, I was offered a contract to write a book about Exchange.
Wow.
Now, the accident was I had signed a contract to write a book about programming the Palm Pilot. But the publisher I was working for accidentally had signed a contract with somebody else to do the same book. And the other people had already written a couple of very successful mobile device books. So the publisher called me and said, hey, look, we don't want your Palm Pilot book anymore. But as a consolation prize, we'll let you pick any other topic from this list that you might want to write a book about. So I picked Exchange and have been working with and around Exchange and its descendants ever since. Completely accidental. I certainly didn't ever set out to work in the Microsoft 365 world, but yet here I am.
Awesome. But you just mentioned Palm Pilot. So back in the day when we had a Palm device which we had to put into a cradle to synchronize emails back to the mailbox, fetch the new ones, synchronize those to the Palm, and then we could put it out and fetch it from the cradle, then to during our commute we can read and answer stuff and then put it back in the cradle again, and then all the emails got sent because there weren't any mobile carriers those days.
Right. But with that said, if you've never held one of those devices in your hand, it was the form factor and the fit, the screen size, the buttons, everything about that device was just perfectly balanced, right? I mean, the industrial design that they did on the user experience and the physical device was a model. It really was.
So do you still speak at conferences?
I do. So I'm going to try to say this as nicely as I possibly can.
Do so.
The conference world has changed a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And we were starting to see that even before COVID, right? In many ways, we are back to where we were in 2002, 2003. There are a lot of smaller, more focused conferences. The trend seemed to be we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? With Ignite as kind of being the example of that. I didn't go to this last Microsoft Ignite. I don't know many people who did. Of the people I do know who went, they weren't very happy with it. So I think that the model of we're going to have the European Collaboration Summit, we're going to have the European Cloud Summit, we're going to have the M365 conferences in Vegas and in Orlando, we're going to continue to see a lot of smaller conferences. It's hard to say, right? I don't want to say that I'm sure the era of the big mega conference is gone, but I think a lot of people really like the smaller model, and they like going to an event like South Coast Summit in the UK. Or I have to say, my favorite event, and the next one that I think I'm speaking at, is going to be Comsverse in the UK, because it combines a community focus with really good support from industry, with I just don't know how to put it. Everybody's happy to be there. Everybody's excited to be there. The same thing is true for South Coast Summit, for Comms V Next coming up in Denver. The smaller conferences really have an energy and enthusiasm about them that I love, that I don't think you see at a Microsoft Ignite or at a SalesForce Dreamforce or these other big mega events.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with you, because one of the benefits being at a smaller conference is to discuss topics, to get answers to your questions. We're talking with other people of the community, or to experts that do have talks on such conferences. And I do remember the last conference where the two of us met was the TC in Atlanta, which was an awesome conference as well.
Yes. I completely forgot about that. I know the TEC people will be unhappy that I didn't say they were my favorite.
I covered it.
But I will be there. So, when I think about where I was originally going when I said I'm going to try to say this nicely, it seems like most of the conference schedule in the calendar year has gotten jammed into the last 3 or 4 months. There's just not as much conference activity happening in the spring and early summer as in years past. I think it was spread out more evenly, but all of the organizers who wanted to have their conferences after the pandemic seemed to have died down some, meant that they did it at the end of the year. And then if they want to do their conference every year, now they're in this pattern of, in October, let's have 10 conferences.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm hoping that maybe next year in 2024, we'll see it spread out a little more. So I have someplace interesting to go in February, March, April.
Yeah, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hope
so now, before we wrap it up, how can listeners test KeepIt?
So that's a good question. One of the things, I'm a little ashamed to admit this, one of the things we didn't have when I came to KeepIt is we don't have an easy way for you to just go to the website and sign up for a trial and try it yourself like Netflix does. We're rolling that out. And I know, right? For a SaaS application, that's kind of a basic thing to have. So if you are interested in it, what I would encourage you to do is go to our website, which is keepit.com. And there is a contact sales link where we can get you enrolled for a free 30-day trial. Shortly, meaning, before the summer, we'll have unassisted sign up so that you can come in and sign up for a trial yourself and try it yourself. Until we get there, I'll just tell everybody my email address. If you have problems or questions about the product, or can't get the trial to work, or you can't reach somebody who speaks your preferred language, just feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is pro at keepit.com. I'd also, I'm always curious about what people think about backup products. So I would love to hear from you if you are what I used to call the never backup people, right? And I used to be one of them. I was like, why would I need to back anything up? Microsoft is protecting me.
Yeah.
Then I had some data losses, and that changed my attitude a little bit. So if you are a never backup and you want to try to change my mind, I would love to hear from you. If you have stories about ways that you think backup products could be improved to work better for the business you're in, I'd love to hear those too.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much for being a guest on my podcast.
I appreciate the invite. I'm glad that the cat didn't act too disruptive. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you, and I'll see you at the Experts Conference, I guess, if not before.
Okay. Thank you.